Ever feel like you're just trying to keep your head above water with the news? I mean, global events move so fast.
It really is relentless, isn't it? Like the
But
ground's always shifting.
yeah, exactly. How do you even find the important stuff without getting totally swamped? Well, that's what we're here for. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to try and untangle some really significant developments from just 3 packed days, September 14th through the 16th, 2025. We've gone through the sources you sent over geopolitical stuff, economic forecasts, health updates, the works. And our mission really is to go beyond just the headlines. We want to connect the dots for you, pull out those, surprising bits, the essential nuggets, so you walk away feeling genuinely informed. We're covering a lot: geopolitics, domestic issues, the economy, public health. It's quite a mix from just a few days. Ready to unpack it.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating, I think, is how these things that seem separate, they're often connected. They reveal these underlying global trends, these tensions. So we'll look at not just what happened, but crucially, why it matters to you, trying to cut through that noise.
Okay, great. Let's dive right onto the global stage then. A few flashpoints really heated up. First, the ongoing Gaza war. It's been nearly a year since the Hamas attacks of October 7th, 2023, and things just intensified again.
Right. And the big catalyst recently was that rare Israeli strike targeting Hamas figures, but in Doha, Qatar, not Gaza.
That was earlier in September, and the backlash was pretty immediate, wasn't it?
Huge backlash. In fact, on September 15th, Arab and Islamic leaders scrambled for an emergency summit in Qatar specifically because of that strike. So this wasn't just, another military operation. It was a major diplomatic escalation.
And it really highlights those fault lines in the region.
Exactly. Critical fault lines.
And while that diplomatic storm was brewing, Israel ramped up its bombardment of Gaza City around the 14th, 15th, telling civilians to move south. We saw those images of mass displacement again.
And the UN Human Rights Council quickly scheduled an urgent debate for the 16th. They wanted to focus specifically on the Doha strike and the intensifying Gaza campaign.
Meanwhile, Washington and Israel seemed aligned. The top U.S. diplomat basically signaled support for Israel going after Hamas leadership, quote, wherever they are.
But on the other side, you had Arab countries expressing outrage, pushing for ceasefires, even considering diplomatic punishments. And human rights groups, well, they were sounding the alarm. Humanitarian consequences, legal jeopardy.
Which has to be putting a massive strain on Qatar's role as a mediator, right?
Oh, immense strain. Delicate is an understatement now. That Doha strike and the summit afterwards, it feels like a turning point. It's not just more fighting, it's shifting the diplomatic ground. Might push some Arab states toward more open confrontation, away from quiet diplomacy.
Really test the fragility of trying to mediate anything there.
A very volatile new dynamic.
Okay, shifting gears slightly, but sticking with tension. Let's look at the waters between the U.S. and Venezuela. Years of sanctions, the political crisis in Venezuela. It's made the Caribbean a pretty tense security spot.
And on September 15th, things flared up again. U.S. forces hit a vessel they said was smuggling drugs from Venezuela. 3 people were killed.
And that was the second incident like that in just a few weeks, wasn't it?
That's right. But then, almost at the same time, Venezuela accused a U.S. Navy unit of raiding one of their fishing boats in their waters, harming the crew.
So, 2 totally different stories about the same piece of water.
Exactly. Dueling narratives. The Pentagon says it's counter-narcotics. Venezuela calls it unlawful aggression.
Wow. When you have stories that different about the same event, that feels incredibly dangerous. What are the risks there? Miscalculation.
Absolutely. Miscalculation is a huge risk. Unintended escalation, too. Beyond the immediate tragedy, these clashes, they chip away at any maritime norms that exist, and they make diplomacy harder, whether it's about humanitarian aid or energy.
Right. And neighboring countries must be getting nervous.
Very. Rights groups, too. They're urging transparency, restraint, worried this could mess with commercial fishing and shipping. That would be a huge blow.
Okay, let's pivot over to Eastern Europe. Ukraine, Russia. The focus lately seems to be energy infrastructure.
Yes, Ukraine's been targeting Russian energy sites more since 2024, trying to hit their logistics, their money. And overnight into September 14th, there was a big drone attack on Russia's Kirishi oil refinery, a huge one.
And did it have an impact?
Yeah, reports by the 15th said a key unit was halted.
And Russia retaliated.
They did. Strikes hit Zaporizhia, setting homes on fire, and then adding another layer. Romania reported another Russian drone entering its airspace. Unauthorized, of course.
That's in NATO airspace.
Exactly. So these attacks on energy sites, They don't just stay local. We saw oil prices tick up on the 15th because of the refinery hits.
So it hits global markets.
Right, and it raises those serious questions about NATO airspace boundaries and what kind of response is needed for these incursions.
Hitting energy hits wallets and sparks geopolitical debates. Makes sense. But it's not just global flashpoints causing tremors. There's intense pressure domestically, too, especially in the U.S. and U.K. Let's start in the U.S. with a really tragic event. The shooting death of conservative activist Charlie Kirk earlier in September.
Yes, that sent shockwaves. Kirk was obviously prominent, a key Trump ally, very outspoken. His death brought grief, but also a lot of fury.
And the investigation moved fast.
Very fast. Over the 14th and 15th, court filings, police statements, they pointed to DNA, digital footprints. They arrested a 27-year-old man, Tyler Robinson, in Utah. They linked him to a Discord account where someone allegedly confessed.
Wow. And they had witness ID, phone data?
Yeah, photographic lineup, phone location data, it was all cited.
And there were details about his location being shared online beforehand.
That's what the charging documents apparently described. Really chilling.
The national impact was just immediate.
Yeah.
Vigils, officials condemning political violence.
And the Trump administration asked Congress for an extra $58 million to boost security for officials.
It just instantly became this lightning rod, didn't it? Sparking debates about violence, online radicalization.
Absolutely. Doxing, radicalization, online vigilantism, but also civil liberties groups urging caution about more surveillance.
It forces that really uncomfortable conversation about free speech versus, the real-world danger when things turn violent, especially against political figures. A tough line.
It really is. And the speed that this tragedy fueled those debates, it says a lot about our current climate.
Staying in the U.S., we also saw these major clashes brewing between federal and local authorities.
Right. On September 15th, President Trump said he'd declare a national emergency, federalize Washington, D.C.
And that was because Mayor Bowser said local police wouldn't cooperate with ICE on data sharing and detentions.
Yeah, correct. And this came after thousands of federal troops had already been deployed to the capital.
It wasn't just D.C., Memphis, too.
Memphis was bracing for possible federal troops as well. Part of a new safety task force Trump announced because of rising violence there. Local officials were concerned, let's say.
So this raises huge questions, right? Federal overreach versus local control. Sanctuary city policies.
And even the Posse Comitatus Act, which normally limits military use domestically. Even with D.C.'s unique status, it's pushing boundaries.
So if I'm getting this, it's not just about policing tactics. It's challenging the lines of authority between federal and local government. What's the big risk if those lines keep blurring?
Well, the risk is setting a precedent. Federal government potentially strong-arming local areas, which could erode community trust in police. And it could lead to major legal battles that might actually redefine those constitutional boundaries. It's fundamental stuff about the balance of power.
And speaking of testing norms, the independence of the Federal Reserve was also in the spotlight. Specifically, President Trump trying to remove Fed Governor Lisa Cook.
Right. Since 1913, Fed governors can only be removed for cause. It's meant to shield monetary policy, and it's rarely been tested. Trump moved to oust Governor Cook, the first black woman on the Fed board, back in late August.
But the court stepped in.
They did. On September 16th, a D.C. Circuit panel upheld a lower court's block, refusing to let the firing proceed. Reports said there was basically no evidence for the administration's claim of a residency violation.
So the Fed's autonomy is safe for now. Limits pressure for rate cuts from the White House.
In the immediate term, yes. But the administration says they'll appeal, so this could end up at the Supreme Court.
Which could reshape the whole standard for removing Fed governors.
Exactly. That's the potential long-term impact.
Wow. If the Supreme Court did redefine that standard, what would that mean for the Fed's independence? Is this about the future of central banking itself?
It absolutely could be. It might make the Fed more vulnerable to political winds, which has huge implications for the economy, for markets, for how the U.S. is viewed globally. It's much bigger than one job.
These kinds of domestic salt lines, they aren't just in the U.S. We're seeing echoes across the Atlantic in the U.K.
Definitely. On the 14th and 15th, London saw this huge far-right demonstration. The Unite the Kingdom rally, organized by Tommy Robinson. Over 110,000 people, they said.
The largest in decades. And there were clashes.
Police reported clashes with anti-racist counter-protesters, yeah.
And politically.
Well, on the 15th, the Reform Party, the anti-establishment party, showed major gains in opinion polls. They seemed to be tapping into those anxieties about the economy, migration, culture.
So political observers are worried.
Yeah, warning that growing support for these kinds of parties could really impact domestic policy, UK-EU relations, even global views on migration and populism.
So are we seeing similar forces, populism, polarization, playing out on both sides of the Atlantic, mirroring the U.S. debates?
The underlying themes, economic worries, identity, migration, they definitely resonate in both places.
But do they play out differently because of different systems?
Well, perhaps. The way they manifest might differ. In the UK, with its parliamentary system, the impact on government might seem more direct sometimes than in the US two-party system. But the core challenge, dealing with a divided public, that feels very similar.
Okay, let's shift gears now. Economy and tech. A real mix here. Soaring markets, tricky negotiations, energy policy changes.
Let's start with TikTok. After years of back and forth,
Right, Washington worried about national security, China protective of its algorithms.
it seems they've reached a framework deal, announced on September 15th. The idea is to keep TikTok running in the US while they hammer out the details on governance and data protection.
And this happened alongside broader U.S.-China trade talks.
Apparently so. And there was talk of a call between President Trump and President Xi to kind of solidify this outline.
So this reduces the immediate shutdown risk. That's huge for users.
Massive. And it could even become a template, how global powers handle foreign tech platforms going forward. Data localization, algorithmic oversight.
That sounds like a huge step. But balancing security and economics for an app with millions of users, that must be incredibly complex. What kind of compromises might be hiding in there? Or what hurdles remain?
Well, the compromises probably involve really intricate details about where data is stored, who oversees the algorithms, things China usually guards very closely. The biggest hurdle now, turning this framework into a solid, binding agreement that satisfies both the security hawks and the tech industry. That's the tricky part in setting a global precedent for digital sovereignty.
Okay. Meanwhile, Wall Street just kept climbing. Big tech leading the charge.
Yeah. After a rough couple of years, stocks have been recovering, partly thanks to AI hype and cooler inflation. And on September 15th, just before a Fed meeting everyone was watching, major indexes hit new highs.
Alphabet crossed $3 trillion market cap. Tesla jumped.
Yep, pulling the S&P 500 and NASDAQ up with them.
What was driving it? Hopes for a rate cut.
Traders were definitely pricing that in more. And tech just keeps outperforming because of demand for AI stuff, hardware, software.
So good news for 401k.
For sure. But it does raise those familiar worries about market concentration. Is it just a few big names pulling everything up? And valuations, of course. The big question is if the Fed's guidance can help broaden the rally, or if we stay stuck with this narrow, riskier one.
Elsewhere, President Trump was on a state visit to the UK promising big money deals.
Right. Over $10 billion in deals were previewed on September 15th. Transatlantic ties have been up and down, but London was clearly pushing the economic cooperation angle for this visit.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Protests.
Oh, yeah. You had the elaborate official welcomes, the pomp, but also activist billboards criticizing Trump pretty sharply. A real contrast. These state visits are always that kind of performance, aren't they?
Definitely.
They boost the investment story for the UK, give both sides talking points. But critics always ask, do these big headline numbers actually mean long-term jobs, or are they just a distraction from the policy disagreements that haven't gone away on trade, environment, whatever?
Yeah, it's that snapshot of diplomacy, isn't it? Billions promised amidst pomp and protest, the complex dance. Okay, finally on the economic front, let's go to California, a state known for climate leadership making. Well, a different kind of move on energy.
A pretty significant pivot, yeah.
Yeah.
Facing refinery closures and high gas prices, they moved to boost in-state oil production. Over the weekend leading into the 15th, lawmakers passed SB 237.
What does that do?
It allows up to 2,000 new oil well permits each year in Kern County, starting in 2026. The stated goal, rely less on imports, stabilize gas prices.
And this came just as there was a big energy deal in the state.
Right. California Resources Corporation announced a $717 million deal to buy Berry Corp. Suggests the industry sees opportunity in this policy shift.
But obviously pushback.
Immediately, supporters talked about consumers, jobs, environmental justice groups slammed at more pollution, backtracking on climate goals. They promised legal challenges.
It really raises that fundamental question, doesn't it? Can a state like California balance long-term climate goals with immediate worries about energy costs and jobs? Or are they just fundamentally at odds sometimes?
It's a dilemma many places are facing, absolutely.
Okay, let's broaden out again. Global health, environment, social echoes. Some crucial developments here. Big news from the World Health Organization regarding obesity drugs.
Yes, they announced they plan to endorse the GLP-1 class of drugs like semaglutide for global use in treating obesity.
These are the drugs that mimic gut hormones, right? Already big in diabetes.
Exactly. They've transformed diabetes care, opened a new front on obesity. So the WHO endorsement, announced around the 14th, 15th, is a landmark step for public health guidelines.
What does that mean practically for countries?
It'll guide national decisions on whether to cover these drugs, especially middle-income countries, but there are huge questions about access and equity. Supply is tight, prices are high, risk of diversion.
So the WHO's stance might push for generics,
Yep.
tiered pricing.
It will likely accelerate those discussions, yeah. Tiered pricing debates, especially.
Could you quickly unpack tiered pricing debates? What does that actually involve for medicines like these?
Sure. Tiered pricing basically means companies negotiate different prices for the same drug in different countries, usually based on income levels. The aim is to make vital medicines more affordable in poorer nations. It's always a complex, ethical, and economic balancing act.
Got it. Thanks. That makes sense. Okay. Meanwhile, a very different health story unfolding in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Ebola.
Yes, another outbreak declared in Kasai province in early September. DRC has faced so many Ebola epidemics. By September 14th, 15th, the WHO and local teams started ring vaccination, using the Ervebo vaccine on contacts, frontline workers in a place called Bulape.
Using limited stockpiles, I imagine.
Very limited, and there was a worrying sign, a case detected about 70 kilometers, maybe 40-something miles, from the main outbreak zone. That's always a red flag for spread in remote areas.
It's such a stark contrast, isn't it? One story about breakthrough drugs like GLP-1s, the other about urgent containment of Ebola.
It really is, and both in different ways highlight those persistent issues. Access, equity, the absolute need for global health cooperation. In the DRC, success depends on speed, funding, and crucially, community trust.
And their worries about aid levels, security.
Yeah, health planners are concerned reduced aid or insecurity could really hamper containment efforts, and neighboring Angola is definitely on alert.
Okay, shifting to the environment, we saw climate extremes hitting hard.
We did. On September 15th, a cloudburst near Dehradun in northern India caused flash floods, landslides, infrastructure damage. This is after weeks of already severe rain in the Himalayas. Economists were immediately flagging crop damage, supply chain issues.
And closer to home, the U.S. East Coast was bracing for a storm.
Yeah, around the 14th, 15th, forecasters warned about a big coastal storm. Heavy surf, rip currents, rain from the mid-Atlantic up to New England. There was even another disturbance nearby with a high chance of becoming a named storm.
So both events, miles apart, highlighting similar issues.
Exactly. Vulnerabilities in how we build cities, our infrastructure, our early warning systems. Climate scientists keep pointing to how warming makes these intense rain events, these cloud bursts, more likely.
And officials warning people not to underestimate non-hurricane coastal storms.
Right, because the cumulative damage, the rip current danger, it all adds up. It's a reminder, climate impacts are here, everywhere. Himalayas, our own coasts.
And finally, we saw these social echoes. Protests, political statements, showing up in culture.
Yeah, quite visibly. On September 15th, the Spanish Vuelta, the big cycling race, was actually abandoned.
Abandoned. Why?
Pro-Palestinian demonstrators staged mass protests along the route, made it impossible to continue safely.
Wow. And at the Emmys, too.
The Emmy Awards on September 14th saw actors using the platform displaying solidarity with Palestinians, addressing global issues on the red carpet and stage.
So the Spanish Vuelta disruption shows how global conflicts can just spill over, impact cultural events.
And opinions on whether that's appropriate are always sharply divided, aren't they?
Yeah. And the Emmys. Same thing. Mixed reactions.
Within Hollywood, sure. Applause from some, criticism from others. It just reflects how intertwined politics and pop culture seem to have become.
It really does feel like no platform is immune now. Sports, awards shows, the big global conversations are happening everywhere.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground. Just a remarkable few days when you pull it all together. We've gone from global conflicts like that Israeli strike changing regional dynamics, that delicate TikTok deal trying to balance security and economics, the tragedy around Charlie Kirk forcing debates about online speech and violence, and even that landmark WHO decision on obesity drugs, which brings up huge questions about equity. You really see the connections. You really do. And if you connect it all to the bigger picture, it just underscores how fast things are changing. Technology, geopolitics, climate, it's all accelerating and demanding our attention, our understanding. Critical thinking, connecting these dots like we've tried to do, it feels more essential than ever. So maybe something to reflect on as you process all this. In a world where a flashpoint here or a policy shift there can ripple across continents, across industries almost instantly, what responsibility do we have, not just to consume the news, but to really dig deeper, to understand the implications, the multiple perspectives involved?
That's a great question to leave folks with. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll catch you next time.